Hey everybody, it's Dr. J, and today we're talking about Hess's Law. Let's talk chemistry. Hess's Law, essentially what we want to understand about Hess's Law is that think of this as we're just adding up equations. We're adding up equations. So basically a reaction can be expressed in steps, okay? And because a reaction can occur in steps, there's going to be a certain energy for each step, okay? And you can add up these steps to get the sum of the entire reaction. And this is essentially Hess's law, everybody. So there's three ideas we're going to talk about with Hess's law. The first is that if your chemical equation is multiplied by some factor, the enthalpy is also multiplied by the same factor. So let's look down here, right? For instance, we got our XC plus 2F2 gives me XCF4. And in this case, this is releasing energy, so we see it as a product. Now, we know if we release energy, we have an exothermic reaction, so our enthalpy is going to be negative 251 kilojoules, right? This is what this is here. Now, if in the chemical equation you multiply by some factor, the enthalpy is multiplied by the same factor. So if I multiply this equation by 2, now I'm going to have 2xc 4F2, 2SeF4, and then guess what happens to my enthalpy? My enthalpy will be multiplied by 2. So instead of being negative 251 kilojoules, right, it's now negative 502 kilojoules. Okay, this is the first idea I want you guys to pay attention to. Okay, now, second thing, if a chemical equation is reversed, if it's reversed, then the enthalpy of the reaction will change signs. So let's look down here, right? The enthalpy is basically just telling me where my energy or my heat flow is going, okay? So we look at the same type of example. Xc plus 2F2 gives me XeF4, and then once again, it's an exothermic reaction. So our enthalpy is going to be negative 251 kilojoules because it's releasing our energy here. Now, chemical equation is reversed. If we reverse this chemical equation, so now my products are my reactants, and my reactants are my products now. Everything's reversed. So, because we reverse the chemical reaction, my enthalpy will also be reversed, right? So in this case, our enthalpy is now a positive 251 kilojoules. And it makes sense because now we're absorbing this energy, right? And since we're absorbing energy, this is an endothermic reaction. Endothermic reactions are going to have a positive enthalpy. Okay, so those first two ideas, those principles for Hess's law, you need to know. Okay, if you multiply by something, by a certain factor, you got to do the same thing in enthalpy. If you flip something, you got to flip the sign. Now, Hess's law specifically is going to require you to add up all of your chemical equations in your reaction. Okay, so if we look at this third point, if a chemical equation can be expressed as the sum of series of steps, the enthalpy for the overall reaction is the sum of heats. So let's say we got two steps here, right? We got N2 plus O2 gives me 2NO, and the enthalpy for this reaction is going to be 180 kilojoules. And we have a second reaction in which we have NO plus O2 gives me 2 NO2. And the enthalpy for this reaction is negative 112 kilojoules. So our final reaction and what we make is NO2. And in this case, right, this is what we're talking about when we're adding up equations. We're going to add up both my first and second equations to get this combined equation here. And once we add that up, we're going to see that what happens? Our N2 comes down. Our O2, right? We add both our O2s together, and this is how we get 2O2, right? 1 mole of each. But what happens to this NO? Well, what happens with Hess's law is that if you have something on the product side and the reactant side in two different equations, they're going to cancel out. So our NO is now gone. all right, because they canceled each other out, okay? And then on our product side, our NO2 comes down, all right? So this is going to be our final equation when we add both of our equations together. And once we have our final equation, then we can add both of our enthalpies together. 180 plus negative 112 gives me 68 kilojoules, okay? And these are the three things you definitely need to know when you're talking about Hess's law.